Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
But here's a question for Democrats, because you hear the president now, a lot on a lot of topics, and this one included, looking back to previous administrations, they should have done more, right? And so as so many people in this country are certainly outraged by the cages and the thermal blankets and the facilities housing these kids, they were all there in 2014 under President Obama. And my question to you, Senator Baldwin, is did you speak up against them then?
On this issue that we get into a moment where we're making progress, and then when it stalls, we turn around. I think we all need to continue to be focused on it and press it through. The American people need confidence that we can solve problems. Nobody believes that we have an immigration system that works. It is broken, it needs fixing, but we've just got to resolve to do that.
But were you worried about it then? Did you raise your voice under the Obama administration?
In numbers of cases, usually I remember a constituent who was in detention at the border, arguably very inappropriately, and we raised our voice in that instance and many others. But we've got to do this now in unison. It's not enough to do it case by case, or senator or house member by house member. We've got to resolve to fix this issue.
Okay. Welcome to the show, everybody. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk. And you're just listening to Tammy Baldwin. She's talking to Brooke over at CNN, and they're talking about whether or not she actually called out the Obama administration for the same kinds of violations that, and when I say violations, that's their language. This is the ever-evolving English language, according to the Democrats, where they decide what means what and when it matters. This kind of behavior, kids sleeping in the little tinfoil outdoor blankets, kids sleeping on the floor, kids being separated from their parents because the parents aren't really their parents, or we couldn't verify it as Department of Homeland Security and all of that. That was never a problem under the Obama administration. In fact, so much so that they kept their objections to it private, and that's why President Obama switched the policy. That's right. That's why he started releasing these people into the United States, because they spoke to him about this privately. They didn't make a big media expose about it. The reason they're doing this to Donald Trump is, well, okay, Trump derangement syndrome. They hate Trump. They hate him so much. Just the sound of his name sends them into fits and convulsions. They're wrecking back and forth and sucking wind through their teeth, and they're losing their stuffing because Trump, every time they hear his name, they lose it. Eyes roll back in the head. They start foaming at the mouth. They're losing their minds. Also, IG report. Also, economy booming. Also, the IRS has just announced they're going to roll out the 1040EZ on a postcard, just like he promised. All the campaign stuff coming true. They also rolled out the new announcement today for government consolidation and removal of waste. We're going to get into that a little bit. So what's on the show today? Well, we're going to continue to talk about this immigration issue. We're also going to speak with Demetrius, Director of Coalitions for Americans for Prosperity, Florida. And then in hour 2, we're going to speak to Cesar Grajales. He is Coalition's director for the Libra Institute. He's going to come on and talk to us about immigration. So jam-packed program. Right now, I want to listen to something interesting from Stuart Varney. He's commenting on the extreme language being used by media types, namely the comparisons to the Holocaust. Rachel Maddow on her show forcing out, she literally was like giving birth. She had to squeeze tears out of her eye ducts to try to act as if the hearing that children are being separated from their so-called parents is a problem to such a degree that she could not maintain her composure on the air. So, we've all been there, discussed something that made us want to cry, but come on. Okay. So what we're looking at is the demonization of an entire administration because their original plan didn't work. The Russia collusion narrative was meant to give the FBI people who were working in the deep state an opportunity to take down Donald Trump, except it didn't work. They expected him to be dirty and to have a whole lot of things in his background that all they had to do was tap into the Trump towers, look at his emails, read his business transactions. That's all they had to do. And if they would do that and find something, then they'd be able to get rid of him and the whole mistake would be over. Except he's not dirty. Except they didn't find anything. Except he didn't collude with Russians. Except they're finding that there are some people who had some issues from before they ever knew Donald Trump. But for the most part, they just haven't found anything. Nothing actionable. So now they have to demonize him at the home front, at the southern border. But I'm telling you, this will not work. The reason this doesn't work is because Americans are now learning about the sheer numbers, 87,000 in 1 year, people, children, just children, released into the United States. They're starting to calculate that cost. Now they're understanding why every time you go to the Walmart, just out here, we live west, we live in the suburbs, and even further out into the suburbs is a big, huge shopping area. And the Walmart out there has just recently changed over so that now if you want to buy something, you have to select English. This has never been the case before. Now, in the inner ring, they have this select English button. I can't tell you that there are that many Hispanic people living here that don't speak English that we need to be able to select English or select Espanol. Americans are counting the cost. Why is your child getting so much? It's drummed into them. They need to have Spanish as a second language. Why is it that everywhere you look, things are being retrofitted so that it's like America/Mexico? And why are our taxes going up for education, but we're getting less out of it for public schools? Because ESL, that's why. ESL teachers cost the same amount of money as a regular standard teacher, sometimes more because it's a specialized area. So you have to hire all of these teachers who are English as a second language teachers to teach all of these kids who don't speak English. And they have to teach it to them in their own language, obviously. So they have to speak the Guatemalan or the whatever that these kids are coming from El Salvador, whatever. Yes, friends, counting the cost. I predict this backfires on the Democrats. It looks really great right now because they got Donald Trump to yield to the trap that they executed. It was nothing but a trap. They knew that if he wrote an executive order, it wouldn't work because the Flores decision is a legal decision. Executive orders do not erase case law. Now that the Flores decision has been decided and appealed and decided again, the only thing that can fix it is congressional action or for the judge who oversaw the case to vacate a part of her ruling or to make an adjustment to it. Now, what do you think the chances of that are? Pretty slim. The Democrats knew that, but they wanted him to do an executive order. Now that the Democrats have watched a lot of President Obama's legacy be dismantled through the pen and the phone legacy, it gets erased pretty easily. It's like backspace, delete, boom, done, no more. So they want Donald Trump to stop trying to get law passed because they know law is much, much more difficult to get rid of. And they want him to do the pen and the phone. And then they want to win in 2020 and have their guy come in and erase what Donald Trump has done. The good news here is that tax reform legislation is actual legislation. The sunset provisions are just the devil, but you take what you can get. And a lot of what President Trump has been doing has been legislative, or it's been through governmental controls that come in through the executive. And if these changes are made correctly, they'll last. But the Democrats are waking up to just how much they did not get done permanently because they had a pen and phone president. They're even saying it. He has a pen. He has a phone. He should make something happen. Anytime the Democrats start suggesting ways that you can get something done, your radar should be up and you should be hitting your brakes, backing up, reassessing the situation. So Stuart Varney is talking about the extreme language and how someone could get killed because you might have heard that Pete Fonda, the brother of Jane Fonda, he has a movie coming out. He's a small-time actor. He's had a couple of films. He has a movie coming out with Sony Pictures. And it comes out, I think, tomorrow. And in preparation for that, he went on to an immigration tirade where he called for a lot of people to be imprisoned, kidnapped, raped, the son of the president to be kidnapped and fed to pedophiles, to be stored in a cage. The Secret Service was called, obviously, by Mrs. Trump, and we discussed this a little bit on the show yesterday, but there's something more that's being done. We've seen over and over again, leftists, when they make the clarion call for craziness, some wacko out in the hinterlands will answer. Someone will actually do something based on this horrible rhetoric that they don't get fired for, they don't lose their movies for, they don't lose their credibility for. The same thing that took down the radio host here in St. Louis, Jamie Allman, the same kind of tweet that he sent that he lost his TV and radio show over. Here we are, this guy, Jane Fonda's brother, he sent a tweet, he sent 3 tweets, much worse than the ones that Jamie Allman issued. He only had 1. And this guy's lost nothing so far. He hasn't even had his Twitter account suspended. So let's listen to Stuart Varney talk about this.
Here's a quote from Rush Limbaugh. If the media keeps this up, they're going to get somebody killed. How about that? Well, he's right. In my opinion, the language used in the immigration debate has been so extreme that it does indeed encourage violence. Nazi, concentration camps, child internment camps, slave labor. We'd heard all of them used. The people using these words should think very carefully about what they're doing. A disagreement on immigration should not be an excuse to label your opponent as the most despicable human being on earth. They're fighting words, and they will be used to justify violence. The left doesn't need much encouragement. Tuesday night, a socialist mob ambushed the Homeland Security Secretary. It was ugly. And one of the activists was an employee of the Department of Justice, can you believe? The thug-like Antifa organization is now tweeting the names of ICE agents. Occupy Wall Street, remember them? They promote the killing of ICE agents in a gory cartoon. Let's be clear what's going on here. The left and their media allies are whipping up hysteria. It's based on hate, hatred for our president. It's wrong and it's dangerous. It's a terrible thing for America.
It is, and it's depressing, and it makes you feel as if you are in bizarro world. It's as if you don't have a way to stop this. It's a kind of madness. It feels like it feels as if something is happening, and you want to find a way to have conversations. And there are always going to be disagreements in politics and in culture and in everyday living. There are always going to be disagreements, but it's kind of hard to respect people who routinely take this kind of language. This is their means of discourse. Now, remember, it was when they go low, we go high. Any little comment by a conservative is just, beyond the pale. And then they take the stiff, well, we're better than that. But they're not. Kathy Griffin has forever changed the Trump family with her representation of Donald Trump with his head decapitated, covered in blood. You know how she changed their family? She changed their family by terrorizing their son. So, Melania Trump in her late 40s, Donald Trump in his 70s. These are adults. They can deal with that kind of imagery. But could a 12-year-old kid who sees his father with the head, a representation of the father, decapitated, can he deal with that? Do we know if he has nightmares about it? Do we know what kind of conversations he's had about the fear that he has about his father's safety? The questions about why people can't disagree with him without wanting him dead? Now, this is every president nowadays. President Obama had to deal with the same kinds of ridiculous, malicious attacks when he was the president. But no one dared hold up what looked like a severed head of him, because that would have been, the ultimate faux pas for the first black president, and that would have been a career ender. And it has been a career ender for Kathy Griffin. She continues to degrade into lower and lower forms of verbal attacks and profanity and all of that. But it's that kind of thoughtless representation that many on the left have defended that calls into question whether or not leftism is a political ideology or a slavish replacement for true religion and true faith in God and true honest allegiance to principles and ideals. all of those things fail anyway. As much as I respect and am appreciative of the Constitution and of conservatism and the Republican Party platform, I think those are all great. But the fact is they all fail because they're subject to our human frailty. They're subject to Kathy Griffin and Jane Fonda's brother. The only thing that's not subject to us is the Word of God. And if we don't grip onto that and start really addressing how we're communicating, we're going to continue to see ourselves become more and more animalistic in our dealing with each other. And it's ridiculous and sinful. When we get back, we'll have Demetrius Minor with us. Stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We only go to the Holy Land once a year, and that's in March. Last year, we filled up several months in advance. So if you want to go in March of 2019, it's time to look at the details. You can get a brochure from us at 800-FAMILIES, 1-800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your telephone number, or go to twholyland.com, twholyland.com. It's going to be a wonderful time in Israel. We'll go to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the holy city of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Masada, the Dead Sea, and on the list goes. If you'd like to go with us in March of 2019, all the information is available at twholyland.com. Order a brochure by calling 800-FAMILIES, option 5.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I know a 14-year-old boy whose mom is a single parent. Unfortunately, this young man has hit a lazy stretch in the road. Lately, he seems to be satisfied with doing the bare minimum. Recently, his grades dropped and his mom put her foot down. She took away a lot of his privileges and placed him under some pretty stringent accountability, ultimately for his own good. Good for her. Some of us are lazy adults because in our formative years, not living responsibly had damaging results in our lives. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 10 has some strong words to say about laziness. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which having no chief, officer or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. In these verses are 3 steps to overcoming laziness. One is identify your responsibility, like the ant does. Number 2, map out how you are going to meet your obligations. This is what I'm responsible for. Now let me figure out how I need to go about this. Then number 3, remember that to a large degree, the outcome of your life is determined by your response. It's not a matter of what you want. It's a matter of what you're willing to do. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. There is a cure for laziness, and it's really not all that complicated or heavy. The cure is doing what you don't want to do.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Okay, welcome back to the show here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. And guess what? I have to say, I really appreciate those spots by Crawford Loritz. That is one brainy dude. He's wise. He's really wise. And then I wanted to also point you guys over to StacyOnTheRight.com, where I've been putting up the spots that I'm doing now on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And if you thought they were good, or if maybe you missed one, they're on my YouTube channel, and they're also over at StacyOnTheRight.com, where you can click, and it's nothing for you to watch. It's just a logo, but it's a 60-second spot where we cover a subject. And I have some new ones in the pipeline. and we've been working really hard. My producer and also Jason has been helping me out with these, getting them recorded and everything. So I'm really appreciating all of that. So it's my pleasure to now welcome frequent guest of the program and associate producer of the Stacey on the Right Show, Demetrius Minor, who's the director of coalitions for Americans for Prosperity, Florida. Demetrius, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Stacey, how are things going?
Pretty well. There's a lot going on, but mainly I'm dying to hear about what's going on in Florida with the Koch brothers. And, do you have a check for me in the mail? Because I hear I work for the Koch brothers, but I never get paid, so I don't understand. Yeah.
I don't want to give your hopes up. I do not have a check for you in the mail.
Oh, man. That seems a little rough. That's not the best way to come into the show. Sorry.
Well, I figure I'll be honest.
Okay.
But this past weekend, I spent some time in Orlando with our lovely friends in the press. Of course, I say that a little facetiously, but I spent some time with a reporter that flown into Florida from New York with CNBC, and he wanted to cover our story on the ground, our grassroots effort, our canvassing, us getting the message out about important issues. Those issues are tax reform, how citizens, how Floridians feel about their elected officials supporting the omnibus bill. If they think that Washington has a spending problem. So he had a chance to see firsthand why the Koch brothers perceive Florida to be a very crucial state in getting their message out.
Okay. So I actually have a lot of respect for the Koch brothers. I disagree with them a bit on their libertarian take on immigration, but I don't have to agree with someone 100% to appreciate the work that they do. And I do think that the Koch brothers have a very effective strategy of mobilizing people, offering educational options so people can kind of find out more about entrepreneurship or different types of governance. And then what they do is they kind of let people loose on their own. It's not really as nefarious as, because the comparison is Koch brothers on the right, Soros on the left, and really that's not a fair comparison.
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that we also tell people about our network is that we stand with those who are right. And so regardless if it's immigration, regardless if it's the economy, regardless if it's spending, if it's dealing with economic issues, if it's dealing with national security issues, regardless of what that person's political label may be, what I mean by that is regardless if they have a D or an R behind their name, if they're willing to work with us, if they're willing to partner with us to help us create a more freer and open society, we certainly are willing to sit down at the table with them.
Yeah, I love that. I actually think it's an easier way to get things accomplished if you're willing to work with people who agree with you on an issue. We've seen that here in our state here in Missouri. And when we do have Americans for Prosperity offices here as well. And what we found is that there are Democrats who on specific issues like education and government reform, they will not just step across the aisle, they'll run across to join in on legislation that impacts Missourians because they really care deeply for their constituents. Now, on other issues, it's a tooth and nail battle, but when they have an opportunity to do so, they will cross the aisle and happily work with Republicans on things that help their constituents. And so I think it's a smart strategy. You mentioned the piece that Brian Schwartz wrote. It's over at CNBC.com. And he starts off, like second paragraph, Americans for Prosperity runs 13 offices in the state of Florida. And he then goes on, next paragraph down, he talks about how difficult, even though AFP says they work with anyone, how difficult some of the policy hurdles will be for Democrats in the midterms because of it's a huge presence that AFP has in the state of Florida.
Sure. So the state of Florida, AFP, just released a couple of weeks ago our scorecard. In each state that AFP is featured in should already have one or should have one coming out in the near future. what the scorecard does, Stacey, is that it takes every elected representative, state senator and state representative, and it gives them a grade from A to S on how they voted in terms of economic freedom, liberty, fiscal issues, and it gives the voters an opportunity to see how their elected officials voted on the issues that matter most for them. And so there's Republicans and Democrats who have A and B ratings. There's also Republican and Democrats who have below a C rating. So it varies from representative to representative, from district to district. But it's a good tool for the voter to have, so that they can not only become educated on the issue, but that they become educated on how their representative is voting. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to voters during our canvassing efforts, and we ask them, okay, for example, here in Florida, are you pleased with the way that Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson voted on X, Y, Z? And sometimes they're candid with us and saying, well, I haven't really followed. I'm not really aware of their record. Well, the good thing with the AFP scorecards is that it helps citizens become aware of their record, so that when they step into the ballot booth this coming November, they'll be sure to know how to vote and how to hold their officials accountable.
So this is an education and outreach effort. It's not just about specific issues that AFP is trying to move the ball on. It's also about informing the voters before the actual election occurs, and you're getting started early.
Well, absolutely. An informed citizen becomes an empowered citizen. So the more information that a citizen can have, the more likely they are to hold that elected official accountable. So, for example, one of our big issues is tax reform. And many of the people that we're talking to, when we ask them, hey, are you in support of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed in December of 2017? And we tell them what that is. And then they tell us, yes, it's common sense that people will want more money in their pocket. And they tell us about the bonuses that they've received, the additional income that has come in, and how that additional income has helped them buy more groceries, plan for a vacation that they haven't had in years, and do various things that's going to help them and their families. When they tell us this, then we're able to communicate with them on how their representatives voted or did not vote for tax reform. That's a big issue here in the state of Florida, and we're confident that we're going to see that communicated in November.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other priorities for AFP for the fall as it pertains to voter education. You mentioned the tax reform bill. That's a biggie. I really think one of the most interesting dynamics that I've seen play out is that the Democrats have openly admitted that they want to increase taxes, and that is so antithetical to people like voting for them, because if you just got a bonus and you have more in your paycheck, even if it's $40 every 2 weeks, that's money that they're saying as soon as they're elected, if you give them your vote, they're going to take it away. So I don't understand why they're running on that, but they are. What are some of the other issues that AFP is educating and reaching out for?
Well, of course, there's right to try that was just passed by the House and Senate, and then criminal justice reform is also a big issue. My colleague Diego came on a couple weeks ago to talk about the Mission Act and how that gives veterans more choices as far as health care. That was recently signed by the president. My colleague will be coming on in the next hour to discuss with you our stance on immigration and DACA, which will be a very pressing issue come November, especially if Congress at that time has not come up with a legislative solution to try this. There are some other state and local issues that are important. School choice, obviously, is very important. But federally, we're looking at hopefully getting the ball moving forward on criminal justice reform, right to try, and as we've always been, legislation that decreases the size of government, makes government small and effective, and promotes economic liberty for all.
So speaking of making government smaller, did you see that today is the announcement that the president has issued his Delivering Government Solutions in the 21st Century, a reform plan and reorganization recommendations for consolidating departments in the federal government and making sure that their operations are not duplicated and thereby making them more efficient? Does AFP have a policy on that or a position on that?
Yeah, I have not seen that, but this is from the little bit that you just told me, this definitely sounds very promising. Obviously, this sounds like something that's going to probably have to go through the legislative process. But if the Congress that we currently have, if they're serious about decreasing government, then it seems like they're going to become allies of AFP. And what I mean by that is that we're in the favor of decreasing bureaucracy, getting rid of needless regulation that puts the burden on the taxpayer, that puts the burden on small business owners. And so that's something that we're definitely willing to look at. And if it's something that benefits the people, then absolutely we'll be on board with that.
Well, what I've done is I just shot you an email with the entire announcement in it with the attachment so you can take a look at it, because I actually think it's going to be something that dovetails in with your agenda goals for the fall. But you first have to take a look at it, and perhaps you can come back on and talk about the connections that are available between the administration and the goals that AFP has. So I wanted to just, as we close out the interview, there's been a lot of discussion about Florida and the kind of purpling of Florida, where it used to be a predictably and consistently red state, but now it is much more like there are certain areas that lean heavily Democratic. And the state has also recently been labeled as leaning Democratic by Larry Sabato's crystal ball. And so it talks a little bit about that in the piece that you referenced on CNBC. Where do you guys see that going? Is it going to go blue, or what are you hoping? What's the plan?
You know, Florida's a very different state, and as we find out from previous election cycles, including the 2016 election, where all the experts and all the pollsters were pretty much expecting Hillary Clinton to win the state, and it didn't turn out that way. But what was interesting is that even though Donald Trump won the state of Florida, Marco Rubio actually garnered more votes than he did. So Florida's very hard to predict. With that said, just because of some of the data we've seen and because of certain districts and how diverse they are in terms of demographics, it's very hard to predict, but we do foresee an uphill battle in the midterm election, and that's on the federal level and also on the state level. The outlook of the Florida Senate and the Florida House is going to look different from when I was there just this past January to March. And so there's going to be some changes there, and we just don't know the degree of what those changes are going to look like. But we're prepared to engage in an uphill battle for those who align with our principles.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with it. Hopefully the predictions won't be as accurate, or maybe they'll be as accurate as everyone was in 2016, which means they won't be accurate at all. We can always hope and pray. Demetrius Minor, Director of Coalitions for Americans for Prosperity, Florida. Thank you for joining the show today.
Hey, always a pleasure to be with you.
All right. Thanks, Demetrius. So we have quite a bit more to get through. I think we have a minute left. I want to go out with Tucker Carlson talking about the Democrats whipping supporters in a mindless rage on immigration to get people to obey. Oh, no time. Okay. We'll come back in with it when we get back from the break. I got to say, I agree with him. And it's not because he's railing against Democrats. It's because the rhetoric has reached a fever pitch, and it's becoming something that's detrimental to the discourse. You could say, well, you know what, Stacey, it's been that way for at least the entirety of the Obama presidency. And I hated that too. I think we have to calm it down. We really do. If If we were someplace and people were talking to each other this way and it was in person, we would either call a security guard or we'd ask the manager to come over and break it up. We would try to break it up ourselves. If not ourselves, we would probably call the police. We would not permit people to talk to each other this way in person in public. But online, it's like, it's worse than the Wild Wild West. Even they had standards. So we'll get into that a little bit more. And your calls, if you want, 866-963-2037. Be right back.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
At Tampa Bay, we adopted a mantra: no excuses, no explanations. The team had spent so much time living in the past, captive to their circumstances and to other people's low expectations, that they needed to learn that we were not going to be victims any longer.
The same can be said for a marriage. Some say marriage is 50-50. For Tony and me, it's 100-100. We try not to give excuses or say, that's not my job. Everyone on a team or in a marriage has a contribution to make in building a winning team or a winning marriage.
Marriage is hard work, but if you commit to it without excuses, it can be the greatest thing in life.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Romans 13:14 says, "Clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the desires of the flesh." So what are you clothing yourself with? Whether we realize it or not, what we allow in our temples affects our way of living. We can't feed ourselves junk and expect to hear from the Lord. Clothe yourself with the righteousness of God at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Did you know that the Centers for Disease Control did a study on defensive gun use by Americans? Probably not, because the report destroys gun control talking points. A Florida State University criminologist didn't know either and did his own analysis, which showed that Americans used guns to successfully defend themselves against attackers over 2.2 million times a year. This number is based upon an unweighted nationally representative sample of over 12,000 individuals. Data from the CDC confirms this result. In fact, CDC data proves Americans used firearms to defend themselves 3.6 times more often than perpetrators utilize firearms to attack them. This information was kept private by the CDC because it doesn't support the gun grabbers' mantra that all guns are bad. Instead of hiding data, let's spread the truth far and wide. Lawful gun owners use weapons to defend themselves and others millions of times every year. Sounds like gun control to me. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Earlier today, President Trump bowed to his critics and signed an executive order intended to halt the separation of illegal immigrant families at the border. Now, if you really believe the hysteria of this last week was about keeping immigrant children with their parents, then you probably assume Democrats are thrilled about this. They got what they demanded. They ought to be celebrating tonight, but they're not. They're still angry. Senator Kamala Harris of California tweeted this, quote, "This executive order doesn't fix the crisis. Indefinitely detaining children with their families in camps is inhumane and will not make us safe." Meanwhile, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut apparently dialed into the same talking points call. His response sounded eerily similar to his colleagues. Here's what he said, quote, "Indefinitely imprisoning children and their families is still inhumane and ineffective law enforcement." Well, by now you probably realize that, like most debates in Washington, this was never really about what they claimed it was about. They never are. The left doesn't believe that America has the right to stop poor people from coming over our southern border under any circumstances, legal or not. Okay, most voters disagree with that. Either way, it would be nice to have an honest national debate about all of this before the midterm elections. That would help everybody. That's the last thing Democrats want, though, because they would lose that debate. So rather than have it, they're whipping their supporters into a frenzy of mindless rage. You've seen it on cable television for the last week. That is, of course, the surest way to short-circuit rational thinking and conversation and get people to obey.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thank you for being with us today. It's Thursday, so Friday Eve, we meet again. Yes, so we're moving through the program here, and I have to say, you know, Tucker Carlson, he's often, you know, kind of the tip of the spear on thoughtful analysis about what's happening with our news and media. And because of that, I just noticed over at Mediaite, they've now launched an attack against him saying, you know, what's happened to him? What do you mean what's happened to him? He's telling the truth. The truth is such a dangerous thing because it can literally drive people into a rage. And that's what we're seeing. Now, let's pivot over to the IG report and notice how I'm talking about it every day. The reason I'm talking about it every day is because the point to this immigration discussion, besides the further demonization of President Trump as some kind of mindless racist who's somehow related to Hitler, is that the distraction tactic, it works. The national news media can't have pundits on to argue about the IG report. They're not live streaming the hearings where Trey Gowdy and Representative Jordan are just, you know, they're really putting the IG's feet to the fire over his continual insistence that the bias did not impact the result of the prosecutor's decision on whether or not to move forward against Hillary Clinton or not. And one thing that's not being discussed anywhere is the fact that President Obama, at the time, knowingly communicated via email with this homebrew server. He knew it was homebrewed. He knew it was outside of what is allowed. He communicated with her anyway. And I can tell you it's been a while since I've been on active duty. But I remember how strenuously they pointed out to us that, let's say you're the innocent party. Someone is communicating with you on something that's insecure. That it's actually your job to look on the reply and see, if I hit reply, does this go just to this person or does it go to a bunch of people that are not in the security clearance? They don't have clearance to view this information. Your responsibility, once it comes to you, if you reply, now you have responsibility as well. In other words, the line of classification, the line of how it's moving, who has custody of the information, once you take custody of the information, it is your responsibility to make sure maybe it went out to a bunch of insecure places, but then it comes to you. You're supposed to act as that stopgap where you say, whoa, we can't keep communicating on this email. You're emailing me from an unsecure location. I need you to cease this email thread and reinitiate from your secure email. That's your responsibility. It's certainly the responsibility of someone in such a high and lofty position as the President of the United States, especially when you know that, so the President has his email, but he also has all of these aides and people who assist him with it, because there's no way the President of the United States can accurately keep track of all of the email that comes into him. That's why there are different departments who handle these things. So he's emailing back and forth directly with the Secretary of State, the head of a government agency. And he never noticed that she was emailing him from an unsecure email account. We know that he noticed because he used an alias. He used an outside email account that he had that had a different name on it to communicate back and forth with her, but not always. So he participated. And the end goal here is to protect him. That's what's so interesting about it, that everyone keeps talking about it. Even I have, about how Hillary Clinton is untouchable, but it's not really that she's untouchable. It's that Obama is so untouchable that no one's even mentioning the fact that he's participated in this act and that he too violated the Records Act. So, you got Representative Jim Jordan. He's questioning Inspector General Horowitz. And they're talking about, kind of laying out the whole thing. But it was a fascinating exchange between the two of them. It's number 6.
The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, is recognized.
Mr. Horowitz, does Peter Strzok like the president?
I can only speak to what his text messages say, and they're obviously not positive comments about the president.
February and March of 2016, Peter Strzok said, Trump's abysmal, Trump's an idiot, he's a bleeping idiot, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. Sounds to me like he hates the president.
His text messages would certainly leave that as the implication.
Your report says Strzok ran the Clinton investigation on a daily basis. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And Peter Strzok, in your report, he was the lead investigator on the Russian investigation. Is that true?
That's my understanding for the time period he was on it.
So the guy, he ran the Clinton investigation, he runs the Russian investigation, and he hates the president, but your report says while his bias cast a cloud, it didn't impact final decisions. Is that accurate?
It didn't impact the prosecutor's final decision.
Right. Let's look at a few other things Peter Strzok had to say. On May 4th, 2016, the day after President Trump secures the Republican nomination, Mr. Strzok says, now the pressure really starts to finish the Clinton investigation. I'm not sure why the pressure would be more or less the day after. It seems to me you want to just do the investigation. On July 31st, as was mentioned earlier, the FBI opens the Russian investigation. 1 week later, Peter Strzok says, I can protect my country on many levels. 2 days after that, he says, we will stop Trump. 1 week after that, he says, no way he gets elected. It's like an insurance policy.
So that there's a lot of information there. A lot of it we've gone over on the program, but he's giving chronological order and reading this into basically into testimony, into the record for this committee hearing. And Sheila Jackson Lee got a little upset about it and, was not liking the line of questioning that he went into. And there's a point to all of this. The Democrats are now gatekeepers to keep this scandal from getting bigger than they can manage. They need it to happen now so that they can quickly nip it in the bud and tuck it into the background, the rearview mirror, so people aren't still thinking about it and paying attention to it when the midterms roll around. There's also the issue of so remember, we've had many, many guests on the program, and I always ask them at some point during the interview, when do you think this will be over? At what point do you believe that the Inspector General, or not the Inspector General, at what point do you believe that the Mueller investigation will wrap up? And all of these experts from Heritage, you name it, Cato, all over, they all say the same thing. They're not sure, but they think that if it's not wrapped up by September, that it will have to last past the midterm elections because they don't want the appearance of the investigation tainting, in other words, an announcement coming out in October and having a negative impact on either political party. So it either gets resolved in September well enough before October, November, well enough before the actual voting period, or it lasts through and gets resolved afterwards, which puts it in no man's land if you think about it, because the election will be the second Tuesday in November. And then after that, like before you know it, you'll wake up from voting the day before, you'll see the election results, and then before you know it, it's Thanksgiving. And then the time in between Thanksgiving and Christmas is really no man's land for getting anything done. You know this. You don't make huge announcements during that time of year because everyone's busy working towards getting to Christmas, getting to vacation time, getting gifts, going to events, attending parties, really just kind of checking out a little bit. They're still working, but it's not an optimal time to wrap up an investigation. So that means, honestly, unless they're planning on making some kind of announcement that they want to be drowned out by the holidays, then that means you're looking into January of next year, which really makes Mueller look bad. It makes the Democrats look like it's even more than a witch hunt than it is. It's not good. So it looks more and more likely, especially with the information that we're seeing now about how tainted the investigation is, how one of their chief witnesses, which would be FBI Director Comey, he now has zero credibility. He's smashed. There's no way they're calling him as a credible witness, not the Mueller investigation. They're not going to do that. So with all of that going on, especially since he's under investigation himself and may soon face indictments or charges of his own. So now we're looking at, just trying to wrap it up quickly and quietly in the dead of night, which is why this immigration story is probably something they've had in their back pocket. They have to have. Look at the timeline, you guys. Look, listen to what I'm saying to you here. You've got the same kinds of family separations happening under the Obama administration. And he's the one who made the announcement that people who come into the country illegally, we're going to actually listen to that audio top of the next hour. So coming in from this next break, you're going to hear President Obama in his own words say, if you're a kid and you come here to this country, we're going to turn around and deport you because you can't come into the country alone as an unaccompanied minor. We're just not doing that. So he'd already made that announcement. He was turning kids away at the border. He was separating people who weren't related to the people that they brought in, the children. They were stored in different detention centers, and there was still a surge at the border. Then he decided, you know what, there's so many of them, and this looks bad. The Democrats confront him about it in the background, and he says, you know what, we're just going to catch and release. That's what we're going to do. He issues the order all over the place. You guys will remember this. It was all over the radio. All of the biggest radio hosts covered it. It was a national travesty on the right because everyone was saying these people are literally getting put on buses and shipped into the interior of the country, never to be seen again. Only 10% of them show up for their immigration hearing. 90% of the 560,000 people who entered the country between 2013 and now, only 10% of them have shown up for their hearing. Out of that 10%, 5% of the total are approved for asylum. The rest just stay in the country illegally and meld into the remainder of the illegal immigrant population. So the next time you hear somebody say there are 11 million illegal immigrants in this country, you got to call them on that one. 11 million is the number they've been using for the past 20 years. I still maintain that there are probably more illegal immigrants in this country or approaching the same number as there are black people in this country. 11 million. Year after year after year, that number remains static, even in years where we have 1 million people come into the country legally and then a huge number corresponding couple 100,000. If it's a couple 100,000 a year, over 5 years, that's another 1 million people. But the illegal immigration and the porous border has been going on for longer than 5 years. President Obama was president for 8 years. President Trump has been in office for 1.5 years. Before that, we had an illegal immigrant problem under George Bush. We've had this problem since Bill Clinton. I've played the audio for you here on the show. Come on, work with me here. These numbers don't add up. If you run a family budget, you know you cannot say, oh, we're still only spending, $75 a week on groceries. That number, even if you buy the exact same number of items and everything's identical week after week, year after year, you're not going to be spending $70 after 10 years. Because of inflation, because of different sized items, because the cost at the grocery store that you're shopping at, they've gone up because they have to pay their employees more. And just like that, you have 11 million turning into approaching 40 million. Now, do we have proof of that? Well, that's a part of this shell game. They never want you to know exactly how many illegal immigrants are here, because if you knew how many were here, you would be much less likely to vote with your feelings and these fake drummed up the sound of kids screaming in these detention centers. Well, I don't know about you, but when's the last time you were around a group of kids where one of them didn't start crying? It doesn't mean they're being mistreated. Is the child on the airplane with you when you're flying on your flight and that child starts crying? Are they automatically being mistreated? If you're at the grocery store and you see a child start screaming and yelling, are they being mistreated, or have they just been told they can't have any candy? Or have they just been told we're leaving, we need to leave the toy department? I mean, let's face it, kids will scream and cry. That's a part of being a kid. It's a form of communication for them. And the pictures that we've seen, the one picture that's gone viral of the little kid with the straight bangs going across, screaming, that picture is actually from a protest that was staged. Most people don't know that because they just see it and they automatically are like, oh, look what we're doing. We have such a horrible history with slavery. We have a horrible history with all these different things. And now look, we're going down the wrong road again. And that is a natural response to people who have a heart. But you're getting duped. The Democrats are playing you because they don't want you to know how many illegal immigrants are here. And they don't want you to realize that the people who are here illegally are here due in large part to actions taken by the Democrats. And that you're paying for all of it. You have to get into what you're looking at and don't trust it. Don't trust it unless you can verify it for yourself, because they're pulling the wool over our eyes, and they're doing it because they don't want us talking about the IG report. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Jim Comey. We'll be back with Hour 2 after this.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
I'm Miki Addison of Urban Family Talk, a division of American Family Radio. We're calling on Christians to push back against the enemy's attack on families. To that end, I'd like to invite you to our Marriage, Family, and Life Conference. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. House Republican leaders have abruptly postponed voting on a compromise immigration bill amid ongoing infighting between conservatives and moderates. Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy's office confirmed the decision. Voting that had been expected today will now be held tomorrow. That's according to aides granted anonymity to discuss the situation. House Republicans have been struggling on rival immigration bills. The price of products you buy from online retailers may soon include an added sales tax because of a Supreme Court ruling today. Fox's Jared Halpern has more from Washington.
A 5-4 ruling at the Supreme Court tosses a 2-decades-old precedent, exempting companies from collecting sales tax in states where it doesn't have a brick-and-mortar presence. Justice Anthony Kennedy calls that physical presence rule further removed from economic reality each year, resulting in significant revenue loss to states. Large retailers like Walmart and Target, with stores nationwide, also argued the physical presence rule is unfair. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Critics of Thursday's ruling say large retailers with an internet presence would not have a problem collecting and remitting a sales tax online, but small mom-and-pop internet retailers would, and that's why critics say the ruling is bad. Demonstrations continue in Pittsburgh days after a police officer shot and killed a black teenager who ran from a traffic stop. Fox's Gernal Scott has more.
Protesters gathered to say police should not have used deadly force on Antoine Rose Jr. Video taken by a witness shows the teen being shot as he ran after the car he was riding in was pulled over. Brandy Fisher with the Alliance for Police Accountability said the latest incident hurts her community.
This is affecting us. It is affecting black and brown people more than anybody in this country, and you can't deny that.
City leaders say the officer who shot Rose was experienced but had only been with Pittsburgh police for 2 weeks. A family attorney says he saw no justification for the shooting. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
USA Today reports the teenager was shot 3 times after he and another passenger fled from a car stopped by police in East Pittsburgh. Police say the car was possibly used in a non-fatal shooting 15 minutes earlier, and officers report finding 2 semi-automatic handguns on the floor of the car. In world news this hour, North Korea and South Korea are preparing for talks about reuniting families separated by war. Fox's Simon Owen.
The head of the South Korean Red Cross heading to North Korea in a bid to make progress on the sensitive subject of family reunions. Park Gun-seo saying he wants to soothe the pain of 57,000 families, relatives who were separated when the Korean War ended in 1953, with no means of communication and often no news as to whether their loved ones are still alive. Reunions have occasionally taken place over the years, but have stalled recently amid tensions over North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Simon Owen, Fox News.
Researchers are reporting viruses that sneak into the brain just might play a role in Alzheimer's disease. Thursday's findings do not prove viruses cause the mind-robbing disease, but they promise to spur new research into the possible connection. The study found higher levels of 2 very common herpes viruses in Alzheimer's-affected brains than in normal ones. Next, researchers found evidence the viruses influence the behavior of Alzheimer's-related genes. In final news this hour, a story for those looking to save money on mobile phone service. A company called Freedom Pop is launching an unlimited $10 monthly plan offering talk, text, and data through Unreal Mobile. The catch is that the data plan only offers 1 gigabyte of high-speed data, and to keep using it will result in slower speeds. But the head of Freedom Pop says the $10 monthly plan is not a promotion rate, it's here to stay. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and the One News Now mobile app for Apple and Android devices.
Hi, I'm Jerry. I always had to have the expensive clothes and sell the right drugs. But drugs and alcohol eventually broke me. So I came to Teen Challenge. And now I've been drug-free for 10 months.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting. Love is only kind. Love is always patient. Love will blow your mind.
So think about this, Mr. Horowitz. Peter Strzok the FBI opens the Russia investigation on July 31st, 2016. Peter Strzok is the lead investigator. Within the next 15 days, he says, I can protect my country on many levels. No way he gets elected. We will stop him. We have an insurance policy. Now, that seems like, at least I think a lot of regular folks would interpret that as more than just casting a cloud on what the FBI ultimately did. I mean, it's one thing to say Trump's an idiot. It's another thing to say we got an insurance policy. It's one thing to say Trump's awful. It's another thing to say we're going to stop him, especially when those statements are made within 15 days, just days after you've launched an investigation into that individual. Would you agree?
And I think the important thing here is the time period we're talking about, because those messages in the July-August period, which we found extremely concerning and antithetical to the core values of the FBI, concerned, as we noted, the Russia investigation, and as you noted, and that's why we had so much concern about what occurred in late September and October.
Exactly. Mr. Horowitz, was Peter Strzok put on Special Counsel Mueller's team?
He was.
So again, the guy who hates the president, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, the guy who ran the Russian investigation, then gets assigned to the Special Counsel team.
Wow. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thanks for being here with us. So Representative Jordan is giving a timeline. He's connecting the dots. How did this man, who has all of this bias and animus towards President Trump, go from the Clinton investigation to the Mueller investigation? And he didn't just go in as someone who was on the team, someone who was, reviewing documents, or someone who was supplementing the team by stepping in when people had other obligations, family emergencies, vacations. He stepped in as the head. So in the background, he's saying, look, we hate this guy. There's a billion people who hate him compared to for every one vote there was for him. He can never actually be a legitimate president. We got to get rid of this guy. It's my responsibility to do it. I mean, he's a megalomaniac. He's like sitting up thinking about how who is president of the United States is not the purview of millions of American voters using the voting booth and the electoral college. It's just Peter Strzok. It's worse than I thought. So remember when we had all the fun giggling and laughing about, it's Jason Bourne and their superhero music, and Lisa Page and Peter Strzok pull up in a big, huge black Escalade, the extended version, and the tires screech to a halt, and they jump out, and they've got their FBI jackets and their bulletproof vests on, and they've got their, their sidearms drawn, and they're clearing corners, and they're, and the music is rolling, and they're doing that thing where, the stunt guys run, and then they roll, and they land on their feet, and they're in the position with their gun up. And we just laughed and giggled, and we were so tickled about that, weren't we? We're like, who do they think they are? Well, now that we read their text messages, we know we may be laughing, but they weren't. They were as serious as the day is long about ending the Trump presidency once they realized they kind of felt a little bit of, they felt kind of responsible. They were like, this is kind of our fault, right? Yeah. And they thought, we're in the FBI. This is like our responsibility. We have to clear the future president of the United States, Hillary Clinton, and we have to take down Trump. And they were so serious about it. They were serious about that, and they were serious about their relationship. It's one of those things where every time I hear it, I'm like, okay. I just try to put myself in the mindset that they have to have been inhabiting in order to have had these kinds of text messages. And we're all human. We've all done it. You text something, and then later you go back through the text thread, and you're scrolling through your phone. You're like, did I text that? So it's kind of like that. Like anyone can get outside of themselves, but they were outside of themselves for a long, long, long time. They were just, riding high. We're the FBI, and we're here to make sure you are never the president. Oh, and also, we're here to make sure you are the president, Mrs. President. And also, don't want to leave out of the equation where we're talking about them rolling out of their big black Escalade in their fancy clothes. They're not wearing a suit from like the Limited or Macy's. They're wearing some high-end, tightly cut, like some laser cut suits. Their fashion is on point. Now, I don't know what they look like outside of the pictures that they've shown, which don't paint them in a very positive light. No shade. I'm just saying that the pictures that people keep putting up of Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, it's not like they look like they're actually from the movies, but you have to imagine that they're both pretty physically fit because they're active, working in the FBI. And you have to imagine that they're, they see themselves that way because of their communications. You just look at what they communicated and you're like, this is how they see themselves. So you wonder, it just doesn't make sense. It also doesn't make sense. So they have him still working. And I don't know if it's because they can't let him go because he's under investigation. So that he has to be at work every day and show up and sit in HR. But they still have Peter Strzok employed by the FBI. The other one, the attorney, Lisa Page, she's no longer with the FBI. And then there's also the others, the 5 who have not been named, who are being investigated as well. They say they're keeping their names out of the public for their protection or what have you. So, fascinating stuff. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Here on this program, I'm going to keep covering the IG report and the developments for all of the different investigations that are going on. And part of me is doing it just because I know some people don't want me to. And the other part of me is doing it is because it's news. It's important for us to finish this thing out. The deeper into it we go, the more we see that this has just been a completely unacceptable, just the whole timeline. It's just been totally unacceptable, utterly unprofessional, absolutely besmirches the reputation of the FBI and government workers who are career employees. All of it just stinks to high heaven. So let's listen to former President of the United States, Barack Obama, share with us his feelings on illegal immigrant children traveling across the border between ports of entry unaccompanied in an effort to become American citizens. It's number 1.
Our message absolutely is don't send your children unaccompanied on trains or through a bunch of smugglers. We don't even know how many of these kids don't make it and may have been waylaid into sex trafficking or killed because they fell off a train. We have no way of tracking that. So that is our direct message to the families in Central America. Do not send your children to the borders. If they do make it, they'll get sent back. More importantly, they may not make it.
Right? So you got this, this is President Obama. He's on an interview with George Stephanopoulos, and the interview was quite lengthy. It was wide-ranging, and he made some other comments during the interview that were equally strong on the side of maintaining our national sovereignty, not allowing any person who wants to live here to just stroll on over the border and then get released into the United States. But there's more. There's always more. So I was doing a little bit of reading earlier today, and it occurred to me that this is all a big racket because there are so many people that I encounter. I can't tell you how many times, and every time, this is the cake taker. I encounter someone who is a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, someone who donates big. They just, this is a solid Republican person with a reputation. And I'll meet them. And over the course of the conversation, when the topic turns to immigration, as it often does, because it's in the news a lot, that person will say, well, we just need to let people come in. And I'm always like, I'm sorry, what? Usually I'm drinking something or eating something when they say that. I'm like, what? Did you say we need to let them come in? Yeah, we need them. We need the workers. I'm like, we need the workers? What about the Americans? We need the workers. And also the Christian side of me, because at that point they always out themselves as some kind of evangelical. I don't know what kind, because I'm an evangelical too. And I believe what the Bible says is that we need to obey the law. But anyway, they'll say, yeah, there's also the humanitarian side. So this is a huge racket. And I want to explain to you how it's a huge racket, because every time we encounter one of those people, when I argue with them a little bit, and I'm not talking about me getting ticked off or losing my stuffing, I don't have to get that upset about it, because I believe I have the right position. We need immigration, obviously. We need lawful immigration into this country, but we also need to do so wisely, and we need to bring people in who serve our purposes, because it's just like a job interview. Being an American citizen, if you're not already born here, it's like a job interview. No one has a right to be an American citizen. We get to choose. Now, we may not have been operating that way, but that is the way our immigration system is meant to operate. So since I know that, I don't have to get worked up about it. I don't have to yell. I don't have to insult anyone. That's because I've spent enough time reading and poring over the issue. And I've spoken to people who are immigrants. I've spoken to people who are recent immigrants. I've spoken to people who are in this country on a green card and want to be American citizens. And then I've spoken to people who absolutely hate immigration, all of it, and they want immigration levels to zero, and they don't have anybody else new coming into this country. So at least I've taken the time to at least get some other perspectives on it. I happen to be kind of in the middle. I believe we need some immigration, but we don't need 1 million people a year, because that radically changes the makeup of this country in a way that is not conducive to maintaining our Constitution and our way of life. Assimilation is the primary goal of bringing a person in. Once you've brought them in, your first order of business is assimilation. If we bring them in too fast to assimilate, it's the death of our country. There. Now, I've just encapsulated it for you. I never have to get mad about it. So when I say it's a big racket, it's because if you look around, you'll see people who are reliably conservative who have morphed over the years into people that you don't recognize, namely Paul Ryan. He's one of the main ones on the right who's constantly beating the drum of we need to give some amnesty. We need to. It's like he's been taken over by a body snatcher. Well, it's not him alone. It's a lot of Republicans. All Democrats and a lot of Republicans support mass immigration. There are no politicians that you'll find in D.C. sitting around at Trump Hotel International who want to take policy positions or actions or legislative movements that would limit or curtail immigration. That's why you've seen the left move to basically blur the line to the point of elimination between legal immigration and illegal immigration. Because if they call them all immigrants, then you don't have to be concerned with how many of them are just stealing into the country and have zero intention of ever learning to speak English or ever treating America the way the rest of us treat it, like something valuable that we want to maintain. There's also a problem because it's a lucrative business, because cheap workers here in this country means you don't have to go over to China and deal with all of their problems, namely them stealing every bit of your intellectual property. The religious right is a part of the problem. I actually was, this is the part that kind of hurts because, people call me far right. You're a right winger. They're trying to insult me and I'm like, yep. What you got? What else you got? And I am not insulted by you calling me a right winger. If it means what I think it means, that's what I am. So next, the religious right is a part of the problem. For the past 15 years, immigration and refugee resettlement has been made financially beneficial for churches, the Catholic Church, basically any religious organization that says they'll sponsor refugees can receive huge amounts of money. Huge. We're talking multiple hundreds of millions of dollars from federal taxpayers to help settle refugees. You've also got Ted Cruz, who is someone that I respect greatly and appreciate his work on the Hill. You got, remember Glenn Beck with that whole charade he did, taking all those truckfuls of toys down to the border, which only incentivized more children to come here illegally. People like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and others have been joined by Lisa Murkowski, Kevin McCarthy, Jeff Flake, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Chuck Schumer. They've all joined together in their quest for more illegal immigration. You got Washington, D.C. in on it. You have the activist media in on it. These are infested with illegal immigration supporters. It is the heart of the uniparty, as they call themselves. And if you want to understand it, you have to follow the money. That's why there's such a huge disconnect between regular people out in the middle of the country like me. You know, they call us Walmart shoppers, but I happen to like to shop online at Amazon. But anyway, we think people in D.C. want to end illegal immigration, and they don't. So we'll talk a little bit about what we can do and more. But next segment, we're going to have someone from the Libra Institute, Cesar Grajales. He's the director of coalitions. He's going to talk to us about this very subject, the latest on DACA and immigration. So stay there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki Addison of Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. Family is so important to everything. I mean, think about it. Right after God created Adam, he made family by creating Eve as his wife.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference this summer. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family.
Our speakers include Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, and more.
We'll even be there.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference will be Friday and Saturday, August 17th and 18th at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Come help us fight back against the enemy's direct attack on marriage and family. That's the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference put on by Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I know a 14-year-old boy whose mom is a single parent. Unfortunately, this young man has hit a lazy stretch in the road. Lately, he seems to be satisfied with doing the bare minimum. Recently, his grades dropped and his mom put her foot down. She took away a lot of his privileges and placed him under some pretty stringent accountability, ultimately for his own good. Good for her. Some of us are lazy adults because in our formative years, we were allowed to do what we felt like doing. Little did we realize that not living responsibly had damaging results in our lives. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 10 has some strong words to say about laziness. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. In these verses are 3 steps to overcoming laziness. One is identify your responsibility, like the ant does. Number 2, map out how you are going to meet your obligations. This is what I'm responsible for. Now let me figure out how I need to go about this. Then number 3, remember that to a large degree, the outcome of your life is determined by your response. It's not a matter of what you want. It's a matter of what you're willing to do. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. There is a cure for laziness, and it's really not all that complicated or heavy. The cure is doing what you don't want to do.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. StacyOnTheRight.com is a website where you can subscribe. We also have Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. We're really everywhere for you. Hope you can catch one of those channels. Thank you so much to those who are listening to us on terrestrial radio. Fantastic to have you here today. All right, let's have our next guest. We are so excited to speak with Cesar Grajales. He's the director of coalitions for the Libra Institute. Thank you for joining in today.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here with you.
So let's talk about this. You are coming on to talk about the latest with DACA and immigration. Of course, immigration is in the news right now with the big furor over children being separated from parents, smugglers, family members, et cetera, at the border, and the surge of unaccompanied minors who are coming over the border. What's the latest?
Well, actually, the latest is that 2 hours ago, the Congress voted in the most conservative bill, and that failed. And now there is a more flexible bill, more moderated bill, that it was supposed to be considered today on the floor of the Congress, and apparently this is going to be actually voted tomorrow because some members of the Congress are going to be reviewing this more moderated bill. That's the latest on DACA.
Okay, so you said the more conservative bill failed, so now we have the more moderate bill. What's contained in the more moderate bill?
So part of this is that in this more moderate bill, some of the things that are included there is not just related to DACA, also to the reunification of the families for the kids that are being separated from the parents lately. And I think I would say that's one of the big differences right there. And also a little bit flexibility in the way and the process of the DACA recipients or the dreamers who qualifies for the DACA or will be qualifying for DACA in the process to become a permanent resident and then to become a U.S. citizen. Right now, the bill that failed in a couple hours ago, that bill was making very difficult for these young people, the DACA recipients, to become a permanent resident and then finally become a U.S. citizen in the future. There was a lot of provisions in that bill that were making, a lot of filters to make it very difficult to them, for them to become a U.S. citizen. This one is more moderated. Again, this one will include a solution to reunify the families soon. For example, right now, as the law exists, parents can't be with the kids in a location, let's say in jail, with the kids more than 20 days. In this bill, they will be allowed to stay, the kids, more than 20 days on those locations with the parents. And then, again, will be more flexible in the process of these DACA recipients to become a permanent resident and then U.S. citizen in the future.
So what is it that, because when the audience that you're speaking to right now is largely opposed to making it easier for people who are DACA recipients, however innocent they may be in the plight, to make it easier for them to become U.S. citizens than people who are paying $50,000 and $60,000 to become U.S. citizens the lawful way, who are still in line waiting for their opportunity to join American society. Why should Americans support that?
Yeah, I understand. I just want to clarify some things, some misconceptions actually out there about how this DACA has been treated, the DACA recipients. And two things, actually. I just want to clarify many things. Immigration is different cases, it's case by case. For example, this week we have been talking about DACA, the kids in the border, the kids being separated from the family, and we mix everything. But actually, everything is completely different. The kids that have been in the detention places, many of them, the majority of them, actually came some years ago when they were coming here without an adult. Parents were sending those kids. The past 2-3 months, those are kids crossing the border with parents or family members. And then the DACA recipients that we were discussing, actually the president was discussing this at the beginning of the year. There's a different, complete story. So I understand the concerns of the community and the people, like you just mentioned, that it looks like they want to go in front of the line to become a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, but it's actually not, because each case is different. For example, I became a U.S. citizen back in 2015. I immigrated to the country in 2000. But my process, because I was a political refugee from my country of origin, Colombia, my process has a specific timeline. So I became a political asylum granted. Mm-hmm. Then I waited a period of time to apply for my permanent residency. I waited 5 years to apply for a U.S. citizen, and then I went to the whole process of learning the history of the United States, improving my English and all the stuff. And then after I passed the test and the interview, I become a U.S. citizen. So for the DACA recipients, that will be the same thing. They will be no place in front of the people who is already waiting. They will be their own. They will have their own process. The thing is, the reason we are opposing the deals is because although the moderator is a little bit in that aspect, it's very difficult for them to become a U.S. citizen. It's not that they're going to become in front of the people who's already waiting. It's the thing that they will be for them almost impossible to become a U.S. citizen, even waiting 15 years from now, 20 years from now to become a U.S. citizen. And the thing is that we should integrate these people to the country and to the economy because at the end of the day, some studies I'm showing that the people who's already receiving the DACA recipients, 690,000, are contributing to the economy in around $20 billion. So
where does that number come from?
So, I mean, what do we going to get rid of people that is already contributing to the nation?
Well, where does that number come from, the contribution that they're making to the society?
Those are numbers that we're getting from different studies, and I can get back to you with the sources and everything. But also, there is also one source, in case you're wondering or some other people is wondering right now, because I obviously heard about the rhetoric of, just deporting everybody else, talking about just the DACA recipients. And that will be cost us around between 7 to 1.7, between 7 to $21 billion to deport all of them. So I guess
did you say 7 to how many billion?
Create that process for them, but to try to integrate these people that is contributing to the country that we know because they do the background check to them. That is no, people that is no, bad people and are contributing to the country. To create a process that gives some certainty to them that in the future, let's say 10 years from now or 11 years from now, they can become a U.S. citizen. But now, as the laws the bill is presented, doesn't show that certainty for them.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is obviously, okay, so I disagree with you about the lack of benefit in deportation because even if it's the high end, you said $21 billion for deportation, that is still far less than the cost of illegal immigrants in this country, where the state costs are individually like $39 million. I live in Missouri. We spend $338 million. California still spends $21.8 billion a year on illegal immigration. So technically, one state's cost would pay for the deportation of the people that you're discussing. Now, I'm not talking about whether or not it's right or wrong. I'm just saying cost-wise, that's not a good argument because the cost far outweigh. We're spending $139 billion a year on illegal immigration. And a new report out earlier this week has updated numbers showing that they think it's $338 billion a year we spend on illegal immigration. I also have numbers here from what we're spending on maintaining the children who are coming into the country illegally. And we're looking at different businesses getting $310 million a year for refugee resettlement. A place called Southwest Key Programs, Casa Padre, they get $310 million so far this year. The year isn't even, we're just halfway through the year. They've already gotten $310 million for refugee resettlement. 28,407,000 plus for fiscal year 2018 to Lutheran immigration. So every faith-based organization that wants to help with settling refugees gets multiple hundreds of millions of dollars a year to help with that cost. Now, it would be different if we weren't borrowing 40 some odd cents for every dollar that we spend in the federal government, but that's not the case. So to justify it to Americans, I'm just wondering, because this is my second question, what is it, and I'm not being rude, please, I'm not angry or upset about this.
No worries.
I'm glad for you to be here. Good. I'm glad for you to be here because I want to be able to talk to you about this because I want to understand why should someone who is here, and I know it's the whole no fault of their own thing with the DACA recipients, but why should any person who comes into the country illegally, whether they were brought here or whether they came on their own, crossed the border on their own unaccompanied, or came with a family member, or were trafficked in with a smuggler, why should any of those people have anything more than a green card? Why should they have U.S. citizenship?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm going to just clarify some things. Going back to the point that each case is different. When we talk about the deportation of the people, I was referring just to the DACA. I understand that there's other people crossing the border in different ways. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think probably a little over 50% of the people who is undocumented in the country right now is people who came with visa, so they overstayed the visa.
Yeah, 40%.
So
40% of our illegal immigrants are visa overstays. Correct.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So it's not just crossing the border. So, but specifically, when I'm talking about this, the DACA is because the case, how it is right now for them, they came to the country, again, not their fault. The average age when they entered to the country was 6 years old. So it means that these people don't even speak the language of the country origin. 90% of them are from Central America. So they don't even speak Spanish, many of them. And the average age right now is 24, 27 years old. So it's still young people that they already lived in this country for many years. So many of them are already embedded in our communities. And
no, I'm not talking about them going. I'm talking about why they should have citizenship. The question that I have is, let's say Americans are fine with them staying, but why do they need the right of citizenship, which acts as an incentive for other children to come here unaccompanied? That's why we're seeing 70,000 kids so far this year have entered across our border between ports of entry, coming here illegally because they understand all I have to do is come as a child, and the Americans will let me stay. How do we disincentivize that if we give people who come that way citizenship?
Look, I want to mention this. That actually, in some point, I agree with you. I mean, I'm one of the persons. Sometimes I go on, or many times I go into Spanish media outlets to speak about this. That immigration, first of all, has to be. We, as an immigrant, have to understand that the immigration topic in the country, when the legislators take this topic and they legislate on this topic, is based on the compassion that the country shows, not because they are obligated to do that. I understand that, and I always tell to my community that we should not demand things to the country. We should accept, for example, a possibility to become a permanent resident, and maybe in the future you can become a U.S. citizen or not, but you have some sort of legality. So the things right now with this bill is that will be making difficult even to become a permanent resident for them. And I understand your point. And in my case, personal case, this is not Libre case. This is my personal opinion. I agree with you with that. On that point, I mean, if the government
Cesar,
at some point legislate and they allow these people to have a permanent resident, in my case, personal, I will agree with that. The thing is that the two
but let me just stop you there for a second.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is the way I see it. As a reasonable person, you know, I'm married, we have kids, and I meet people all different walks of life, and the ones who I meet who are immigrants. So I don't have the same experiences as some people have had where immigrants of some sort have been rude or mean or what have you. Usually when I'm interacting with someone and they tell me they're an immigrant, you know, we're doing business or something and it's going great. And I'm really appreciating the work that they're doing or whatever, you know, whatever the reason we're working together on something. So it's not that I'm against immigration. I'm not. But what I'm worried about is that when we start having our compassion, because I feel a lot of compassion to people who your parent does something and then you turn 16 and you want to get a driver's license and you can't get one because you're here illegally. Or you apply to college, you're 4.0 GPA, and you realize you can't go to college because you're not in state, you're not out of state, you're nothing because you're here illegally. I get that. As a mom, that's a terrifying proposition. I think about our kids and what they would feel about me and their dad if that was their case. Like they'd say, Mom, why'd you do this? You know, so I understand that. It's not that I don't have any compassion, but my concern is when we see the surge over the border, when we look at how many people are coming here illegally, and the reason that they're giving is Obama said we could come. If we come as kids, we get to stay. And he didn't exactly say that, but that is what has been, put out there. It's the question is, even if I say, yeah, everybody who's here already gets amnesty, they all stay, let's just end this. I just want to stop fighting. How do you stop the new people from coming? And I haven't been able to find anyone who can tell me how we do that if we don't have some kind of,
I'm going to tell you how we can do that, or how we can be one step forward to do that. And
can you hold on a second?
Because there's a music on that.
Okay, there's music. So can you hold on and tell me right after the? Yeah, we'll go to the break. We'll come back and then you can tell me, because I do want to hear, and I appreciate your time today. Just hold on. We'll be back right after these messages.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
At Tampa Bay, we adopted a mantra: no excuses, no explanations. The team had spent so much time living in the past, captive to their circumstances and to other people's low expectations, that they needed to learn that we were not going to be victims any longer.
The same can be said for a marriage. Some say marriage is 50-50. For Tony and me, it's 100-100. We try not to give excuses or say, that's not my job. Everyone on a team or in a marriage has a contribution to make in building a winning team or a winning marriage.
Marriage is hard work, but if you commit to it without excuses, it can be the greatest thing in life.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place, Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
They want to control who comes into their own personal domain, but when it comes to the United States, it's open season.
No thanks.
So this idea that there's this magical wall, it's like a unicorn wall. It's rainbow colored, and it just separates everything off. It just keeps the money from ever touching anything that might have to do with abortion.
Tap it down.
What happens is those terrible results end up negatively impacting society. That's what she thinks about unborn children. That woman fixed her mouth. She's like Cecile Richard's little sister.
Tap it down.
I won't link it myself, though, because that won't look good. My buddy over at Columbia Law, he's got connections at the New York Times. He can make this happen. Presto changeo, boomo bango.
Yes.
So buckle up. Put your seatbelts on, pull your socks up, get yourself ready. Prepare yourself, gird your loins, all of those things and more, because there's so much more for us to find out.
Stacy on the Right, weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the program. You can find us everywhere, streaming live to Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube, as well as live on terrestrial radio all over the country, 21 states now. So we're really glad to be with you today. And we're glad to have our current guest. It's Cesar Grajales, Director of Coalitions for the Libra Institute. And we're having a very wide-ranging conversation about how to fix the problem that we're having with immigration. And there are different avenues, different people that we're dealing with. So it's not all the same people groups. Some of the people appeared in different ways, and all of them need a specific fix that Congress has been unable to come up with. They've literally been unable to fix this problem the entirety of the Obama administration, and now here we are into the Trump administration still having the same discussions. Cesar, thank you so much for staying over the break with us. I know your time is valuable. You were explaining how we could fix it, and I'm dying to hear your interpretation of what could happen.
Thank you again for having me. Look, I mean, we were talking about, look, let me go back. So there are people that right now, at this moment, this week, is pointing out to, let's say, to the Republican administration for what is happening to the immigration. I don't think so. I think it's many different administrations, the problem. But also, saying the problem with the immigration is just a problem for the United States, I think is wrong. And let me tell you how we can help to fix, or what will be the avenue to fix the problem of immigration? Because you were mentioning that if we, let's say, create an amnesty or legalize everybody that is already here, that will be continue happening in the future. And I agree with you that potentially could happen again. Why? Because the problem is not the United States. The problem, or part of the problem, is the countries that, in my case, I'm coming from. Because there is, a lot of corruption in that government, because there are, unstable governments, and because there is a lot of violence, because there's a lot of, there is no opportunities for the people in those countries. So I think that we, in my case, I don't think you probably know most of the people who's listening to the program right now, but I say based on my community. If we want to fix the problem of immigration in the United States, we actually should have to be more of demand in our countries of origin to create better opportunities for our people, for our communities back in our countries. I promise you that many of the people who immigrate to the United States probably will be stopping coming because they will have those opportunities and they will be risking their lives or putting their kids through this difficult process. So I agree with you. The problem in immigration is not just the United States. It's a problem in our countries, in my case again, of the origin, Latin America, that we have governments that are pushing away families, pushing away people, that is not creating opportunities for the people already in those countries.
Yeah.
And that is sad. So I think helping to fix that. I also know the United States already have a program to help to develop these countries, but sadly, sometimes many of those resources go to the grown governments and they, put the money in
they were
different
largely
places and never
dismantled
helping
under the
actually
Obama
getting that to the
administration.
people.
Yeah, so the Obama administration actually diverted some of those dollars away from drug interdiction programs and things that were established and really working to keep some of the violence down and to keep, the drug lords from completely overrunning the country. And as soon as President Obama redirected those funds, we saw an uptick in violence and a corresponding increase in people trying to get away from it by coming to America. So I do have a question for you, but based on what you just said, I have talked many times on this program about the untapped wealth of people who, like the DACA recipients, they live here in this country. And what happens is, so the reason they have a bad reputation is because you'll see them on television protesting, and they're saying things like, Viva la Mexico, or, El Salvador forever. And the reputation is they love that country more than they love the United States, but they've never been there, and they say they don't speak the language, but they look an awful lot like they may speak the language to us. So there's a value in some of the deportations. I've read stories, in-depth research from reporters who leave the United States and go down to Mexico, into the towns where people are deported into. And what they find is that people who've lived in America for an extended period of time, when they get back to Mexico, they're no longer willing to put up with the government as it is down there. They often run for office. They will set up their own businesses, and they start to kind of spread that individual liberty American attitude. They spread it around. It starts to change the place that they go back into. So isn't there some value to having some of the people who are here illegally go back to their home countries to sow the seeds of liberty and to start to change their countries, while we as a government reinstitute those funds and get back into the business of helping El Salvador and Guatemala, et cetera, to get back on their feet, to kind of change the direction?
Look, I mean, for me saying that we have to send some people back just to help them to rebuild the country, I can't agree with that. But I do agree that we need to have a more education in those countries about liberty, economic freedom, why they should preserve the values that actually made this country great, why they should create more opportunity for the families right there. And I agree 100% with you that we should invest in that. And also when I mentioned this, I want also a really strong border. And I'm an immigrant to this country, but this is my country now, and I protect this country. And let me tell you, I actually agree with you because sometimes I had conversation with friends of another immigrants about if we are here, we are supposed to protect this country, love this country. And yes, I do care about my heritage and the country that I come from, but this is my country first. So I agree with you, and it gets me a little, bothers me when I see someone, waving the flag of another country instead of just waving the flag also of the United States. If you want to stay here, I agree with you on that one. So that's the conversation and the education that through the Libre Initiative and the Institute I'm trying to get through my communities. And also, I think I will blame that some of those situations is because the misinformation that these immigrants or the DACA recipients talking about them are having from another NGOs, that the only thing that they want is capitalize in votes and canalize the votes, let's say, to the liberal ideas or liberal things. So in my case, in our organization, is do a counterpart to that and explain why, if you want to stay in the country, protect the values of economic freedom. And if you have family back in your country of origin, talk to them on the importance to protect those values and actually continue educating or informating your communities back in your country of origin. And if you decided to stay here in this country, protect this country, love this country, and love the flag.
You know what? I appreciate you saying that. And I just think we had a great conversation, and we could definitely do more segments than just these two on this subject. And I hope you will come back on and talk to us again. I don't have, an angry bone in my body towards immigrants or illegal aliens who are here because they're trying to escape, a horrible country, and America is great. But I am a realist, and I understand that we can't take everyone in who wants to come. And so this is a very difficult topic for Americans. I can't tell you how many people I've met who they really, really sympathize with people who want to come and live here, but they don't understand how we can, at the levels that we're currently receiving people in, how do we help those people become, as you have become, American citizens who love this country and value this country over any other country? We need time to make that happen. And so there's got to be an answer. I believe there's an answer. And hopefully, this is the conversation that happens, but more often all over the country to get us there. You've been wonderful today. Thank you for joining us. Cesar Grajales, Director of Coalitions for the Libre Institute. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm willing to be here anytime you need me. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. We'll talk again soon. So at least what I have to say about that interview is it does me a lot of good as a talk show host and as someone who holds a very hard right line on immigration, to be able to have a conversation like that. And I asked him some very difficult questions, and he was very honest about it. And I much prefer for someone to be honest and we have a give and take back and forth than to argue, as some other guests have done. We have had others on who hold a much more liberal view of immigration, and they've not been able to handle the questions as well as Cesar just did. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate what he said. One of the most important things he said in this interview is that the Libre Institute, and he personally, they advocate for people who are in the country, whether they're legal or illegal, whatever their status is, for them to prioritize their allegiance to America. I tell you what, I can tell you based on my own personal feelings and people that I've spoken with, not to speak on their behalf, but stay with me here. I honestly believe that if we saw people advocating to stay in this country and they were waving the American flag and holding up signs that said, "We are Americans too. We love you. We want to be here. We speak English and we pledge allegiance to the same flag that you do," that we would have a much less difficult time getting a legislation packaged through the Congress and signed and onto the president's desk because Americans would be unified in welcoming a group of people like that into our populace. The problem is that we do have a lot of individuals who are in the country illegally, and the pictures are just everywhere of them flying the middle finger and having signs that are very, very offensive to Americans. And then the other thing that Cesar and I didn't just discuss, and I didn't want to hold him responsible for it because he's a legal immigrant. He actually legally went through our process and became an American citizen. So I don't want to hold him responsible for illegal alien crime, just like I don't want people holding me as a black person responsible for gang crime in inner cities. I'm not a gangster. I've never been one. I've never shot anyone. I've never owned a firearm illegally. I don't want people holding me responsible for that. But let's be real here. Oh my goodness. We have a lot of illegal alien crime. And if you're in the audience, or if your neighbor or someone you know has lost a child or a family member to illegal alien crime, then it doesn't matter what flags are waved or what those people say, they're not going to get your support. And that's a huge issue. And, you know, we've had guests on the program from organizations that support these families who've lost their loved ones to this type of crime. And these are real people who are hurting. They're living their lives separated from their family members because the family members are dead and they were killed by this type of action. So it's a complicated issue, as every issue is that involves human beings. We don't have any easy issues. Have you noticed that? There are no issues that humans are involved in that are easy. So we have to, I think, first of all, elevate the level of our conversation. I would say that Cesar Grajales is one of those examples of someone who can come onto a program where he could have been very contentious, and instead he chose to engage in the conversation, and we were able to get a lot of good information. He shared good information. I did not know that they'd already calculated how much it would cost to do deportation. I thought it was just some round estimate. And there's a lot to be said for, you know, a multi-pronged approach. So, you know, if you talk to anyone, they'll say, well, we can't deport them all. Well, I don't know. You know, can you find every person in America who owes tax to the federal government? I think you can. Does the federal government collect taxes from every American who's eligible to pay them? Yeah, and that number's way more than 11 million. By orders of magnitude, babies. It's large, and the government doesn't flinch. They make sure and collect tax dollars. So we can do anything we want to do. We are America. Go online and type that in and see what comes up if you want to laugh. There was an article out about, I don't know if it's a parody or what, but it was supposed to be about the Trump doctrine of America First and what its slogan is. And they interviewed some people at the White House, and they came up with something that's not appropriate for radio. But I couldn't help but be tickled by it because it's so, well, it's kind of Donald Trump. So anyway, I believe that we could solve this problem. I believe we could. I believe we could not only solve this problem, but that we could create something going forward that would not incentivize people to come here, that the American people are eminently more generous than any other nation on the face of this planet, and that if we were asked to, we could not only build a wall with private tax dollars and get it done in 12 months with private contractors, and that it wouldn't be a political issue. Of course, Democrats would try to stop it, but I'm saying it could be done. I believe we could, simultaneous to funding that wall privately and getting it built in 12 months, that we could also stand up individual programs in all of the countries that are currently sending thousands of their unaccompanied minors. We could stand up programs in those countries to radically change the lives of the people who live there. And we could do it all with private money. I don't just believe that, I know it's the truth. The question is, why don't we? We've been talking a long time. And now we're just fighting each other. We're just biting each other's faces off, metaphorically, on Twitter. Which, by the way, I've been so disgusted with it. I'm like 30 seconds away from logging off of that puppy permanently. It's crazy. Anyway, that's the show for today. We actually ran out of time. We'll be back with more. You guys, find me online and have a blessed evening.
The views and opinions